This is Standing Watch. And now, Evangelist Norbert Link.
Well, greetings everyone, and welcome back to our Standing Watch program. Much has been said and reported this week about the bombshell interview between Harry and Meghan and Oprah. And people have voiced their opinions, their convictions as to who was right and who was wrong, who was lying, who was telling the truth. Well, I'm not going to go into that today at all, but I do want to talk a little bit about the prophetic fallout, potentially. Now, I'm not here to tell you that this interview was in fulfillment of biblical prophecy. No. But certain things, certain developments could very well lead, in light of what we have already seen so far, to the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. I like to quote a few excerpts which I believe are remarkable in that light. Excerpts from news articles. Here is one from Deutsche Welle, dated March 8, saying this. Meghan said there were concerns about how dark her child would be. Now, Oprah later clarified that these concerns were not raised by the Queen or Prince Philip. The article went on to say, Meghan said she told the palace that she needed help for mental health concerns. I just didn't want to be alive anymore. Now, before the interview was aired, before the Queen had actually seen it, she had given a televised address on Sunday to mark Commonwealth Day. And then the article went on to say that questions remain about the future of the royal family near the end of Elizabeth's reign. The Associated Press added on March 10, the interview rocked the royal family and touched off conversations around the world about racism, mental health, and even the relationship between Britain and its former colonies, now known as the Commonwealth of Nations. It used to be called the British Commonwealth. The Associated Press also wrote on March 10 that Buckingham Palace issued a statement after the interview, saying, the whole family is saddened to learn the full extent of how challenging the last few years have been for Harry and Meghan. The issues raised, particularly that of race, are concerning. While some recollections may vary, they are taken very seriously and will be addressed by the family privately. But then, today, Prince William answered a reporter saying, we are very much not a racist family. And then it goes on to say in the article, fallout from the interview is likely to only fuel the debate over the future of the monarchy and its role both in Britain and in other countries around the world for which the Queen serves as head of state, again referring to the Commonwealth nations. The Queen remains the head of state for 15 countries, most of which were once part of the British Empire, including Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and island nations in the Caribbean. Now, in addition, the countries of Malta and Cyprus and South Africa are also part of the Commonwealth nations, and also other African nations such as Kenya, Nigeria, Cameroon, Ghana, Uganda, and Tanzania. Express wrote on March 10, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry have put the Commonwealth at risk after former Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull said the bombshell interview bolstered his case for breaking away from the British monarchy. While the Queen's role is mostly ceremonial, she does have the power to sack the Prime Minister, which happened in 1975. So are these events portraying a future breakdown of the royal family, of the monarchy, and maybe of what's remaining of the Commonwealth nations? Several years ago, we published a booklet titled The Fall and Rise of Britain and America. And I like to quote from this booklet a little bit, pages 6 and 7, under the headline, Birthright Blessings of Abraham Were Passed On. Because you see, God had promised Abraham tremendous physical and spiritual blessings for his descendants. And let's notice now how these blessings were passed on to Jacob's grandsons. Jacob, or Israel, the grandson of Abraham, passed on these blessings to his grandchildren. And so we say this in our booklet. In time, Joseph, the son of Jacob, took his sons Manasseh and Ephraim to see their grandfather Jacob. And Jacob told his son Joseph in Genesis chapter 48 and verse 5, "And now your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine." In other words, Jacob adopted them to be his children, like Reuben and Simeon were his children. The account shows, we go on to say, that Joseph, facing Jacob, took them both. Ephraim with his right hand toward Jacob's left hand, and Manasseh, who was the firstborn, with his left hand toward Jacob's right hand, and brought them near him. Then Israel, crossing his hands over the lads, stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, guiding his hands knowingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. This is notable, because normally the firstborn is given the greater blessing. So Jacob blessed Joseph and said, "Let my name, the name of Israel, be named upon them." And that is written in verse 16. Now when Joseph saw that his father had laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, his secondborn, it displeased him. So he took hold of his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head and to lay it on Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, "Not so, my father, for this one, Manasseh, is a firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great," talking about Manasseh. The contemporary English version says, "He will someday become a great nation." And the International Standard Version says, "He is going to produce a large nation, and he is going to be very great." But it goes on to say, "But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude, or a company, or a commonwealth of nations." And you can read that in verses 17 to 19. The word for multitude, or company, or commonwealths means fullness. In other words, it's talking about many, many nations. So the birthright of Abraham was passed to Ephraim and Manasseh, the sons of Joseph. Manasseh was to become a single great nation, known today as the United States of America. And before you shake your head with disbelief, this booklet proves it. And then we go on to say, Ephraim was to become a multitude, or a company of nations, which we know as the Commonwealth nations of the British Empire, and this booklet proves that point as well. But God also declared that he would take those blessings away again from the modern descendants of Ephraim and Manasseh in the end time, if those nations would sin against God. And they most certainly have sinned against God. Now, we also make another point in our booklet, and that is that God made a promise to David, saying that David would never lack a descendant of his to sit on the throne of David until Jesus Christ returns. And in Jeremiah chapter 33 and verse 17, which we quote in the booklet, it says, "For thus says the Lord, David shall never lack a man, or a descendant, or a person," could be a woman too, "to sit on the throne of the house of David." God had promised David that a descendant of David would always occupy his throne. And this has been the case from the dynasty of David to the present dynasty of Queen Elizabeth II. And this booklet on the fall and rise of Britain and America proves that point as well. But we also say this on page 11 of that booklet: the final king of the house of David, prior to Christ's return, may cease to rule for a very short period of time. Quoting Hosea chapter 10 and verse 5, which says, "At dawn the king of Israel shall be cut off utterly." Now other translations bring it slightly differently. The New Jerusalem Bible says, "At dawn the king of Israel will be no more." The Revised English Bible says, "As swift as the passing of the dawn, the king of Israel will be swept away." The Contemporary English Version says, "Israel, at dawn your king will be killed." Similarly, the Good News Translation saying, "As soon as the battle begins, the king of Israel will die." And the International Standard Version says, "Early one morning, the king of Israel will be totally silenced." So however you look at this passage, it would be very interesting to watch future events to see how the fulfillment of what is meant here is coming about. The pulpit commentary states that in a speedy manner, quickly as the morning dawn gives place before the rising sun, the king, or perhaps no particular king, but merely the representative of the royal office, or maybe the royal office, the monarchy itself, would be cut off. So these are all interesting possibilities, and in light of what we are seeing right now, it might very well lead to that in the not-too-distant future, both the demise of the royal family and the royal office, the monarchy, and also the Commonwealths of nations. Again, for more information, please ask for our free booklet, The Fall and Rise of Britain and America. And we also have other free booklets which go into these issues, like our booklet on the book of Zechariah, and many other prophetic booklets we have published. So thank you very much for listening, and until next time, this is Norbert Link for the Standing Watch program.
Standing Watch is a presentation by The Church of the Eternal God, P.O. Box 270519, San Diego, California 92198. More information is also available at our website, eternalgod.org.